Hey everybody, Dr. Mac. I'm here now at Jolly Boys Hostel Backpackers in Livingston, Zambia. This is the Zambian side of Victoria Falls. And yesterday I was over in Botswana on a safari and gave a quick video on Botswana's geography and history and econ. So I thought I'd do the same thing with Zambia because today's my last day in Zambia. Zambia, like so many African countries, gained their independence in the 1960s. It was actually quite a peaceful transition, which means that they didn't have to deal with recovering from war afterwards. Still to recover from the colonial period, but everybody had to deal with colonialism. If you can skip the additional burden of recovering from war, that's a good thing. They had discovered copper. Copper had been mined in this country already for several decades. The people who plotted out the copper mines in Zambia were actually the same people who plotted out some of the iron mines in Minnesota. And still to this day, copper is the number one source of income for the country. Approximately 80% of the foreign earnings for the country come from exporting copper. The problem is we're in one of those peripheral economies. So they do the mining, they do actually get it all the way to something like 99.999% pure copper, and but then they export the raw copper. And if copper's, I don't know what it is these days, but we're going to say several dollars a ton per ton. Now I think it's maybe a couple dollars a pound, let's put it that way. Let's say it's a few dollars a pound. But then you go and buy some high-end electronics for a few dollars, let's say $20 for a boombox, and it has just a couple grams of copper. The value of that copper has been added exponentially. That value goes to, say, China that actually made the electronics. Only a couple dollars went into Zambia that sold the actual raw copper. So that's part of the core periphery idea, that the peripheral economies, which would have been traditionally the colonies and maybe some other countries, sending raw products into the core economies such as the US and Western Europe, who then add lots of value to something. They'll sell the added value products within their own countries, and they'll sell a little bit back to the peripheral countries. But the peripheral countries have to sell lots of raw product before they can buy any of that added value products, such as the final electronics. It also means that as the prices of copper go up and down, then Zambia's economy goes up and down. And that's when you have such a single source of income, your economy really fluctuates. It's a boom-bust economy, just like mining that we talk about, boom towns in the US. Basically, Zambia, the entire country, is a boom-bust economy. By the 1980s, Zambia was starting to have some problems. The price of copper was low. They had to borrow from the World Bank. The World Bank says, okay, we are now doing what's called the structural adjustment programs, where we are adjusting the whole structure of your economy. Things like trying to sell off government-owned assets, the mines. Some countries did the water supply. Some countries were in charge of electricity supply. In the United States, those are private organizations, but they are monitored by the government because we see them as so important. But the World Bank and IMF said to Zambia that you must sell those assets off. Now, usually they did not have to sell them off in their entirety, so the government still maintained such maybe 51% control. But to improve the efficiency, they did bring in private corporations from around the world. Things such as Sandvik may be one that you might be aware of, Anglo Gold and things, big mining companies. Things improved slightly, but my experience was by 2006, 2007, Zambia had, excuse me, just woke up, about $5 billion in debt, and that was overwhelming. which is really rather fascinating to think. Here's a country that is in debt $5 billion, and we have individuals in the United States, or the former president of Zaire, Mobutu, he himself is personally worth $5 billion. We have people who could basically go in and buy the entire debt of Zambia and basically say, you owe me. But that's the key. The World Bank gave up some of that debt, said you don't owe it anymore. And the economy boomed. Inflation dropped, the currency solidified, things were really good. Somehow, through some economic changes once again, I believe the copper prices dropped still further. That was part of the issue. Also, China came in and said, oh, we still think you're a good risk. So China goes in and says, we will loan you money to build things such as the bridge over the Zambezi at the Kazangulu Kasane border with Botswana, just for instance. Upgrade railroads, upgrade all kinds of infrastructure. Today, 2018, after being down to less than $1 billion of debt in 2017, now in 2018, officially Zambia now officially owes almost $9 billion. That's officially on the books. The concern is that there's another roughly $9 billion that the government is actually indebted but doesn't yet know. And China will eventually say, by the way, you also owe us this money. How does that happen? Probably lower level ministers and officials within the Zambian government sign off on things. China brings in their part, and the ministers in Zambia leave and don't tell their bosses, and then China comes back a few years later and says, you owe me. The World Bank forgives debt. We don't know what China will do. Will China say, you owe me and we'll forgive you? Or will China say, you owe me and we want something to replace that value? And the only thing that's left is the copper mines. That's one of the big concerns. So, Zambia, independence 1960s, heavily dependent on copper. That means as copper prices boom and bust, Zambia's economy booms and busts. Structural adjustment programs means things like selling off government assets, privatizing. It means getting some of the prices right between local producers and imports. It means opening up your economy and allowing more imports. That has now moved on to the Highly Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, and Zambia is participating in that as well. But the Highly Indebted Poor Countries is run by the World Bank. Much of Zambia's debt is to China, which is not participating in the highly indebted poor countries. The shopping malls, the Western style shopping malls in Zambia are on the surface very encouraging. Oh, they've got a booming economy, but for just a very small percentage of all their citizens. 99% of the citizens of Zambia do not operate in that economy. They're still working on a subsistence economy. They will be the ones who will truly suffer as China starts to say, you owe me. Some concerns for Zambia these days. Core and periphery, where does the debt go? Where's the money come from? The economic geography.